Healthy muscles are an important part of living a healthy life. We rely on our muscles every day to move around and perform activities. Unfortunately, sometimes our muscles aren't so healthy due to either obesity, injury, disease, or just the natural aging process. Developing effective treatments to improve muscle health requires first measuring the muscle. One way we do this is with magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI, which allows us to peer inside the muscle and see how it is organized. Muscle has a complex structure. It's made up of bundles of fibers that are themselves made up of smaller bundles of muscle cells. These muscle cells are very small. Each one is only about the size of a human hair. However, changes in their structure affects how muscle functions. Unfortunately, traditional MRI can't give us this information because it doesn't have high enough resolution. If we zoom in on the MRI, we can't see the individual muscle cells, but that doesn't mean that the information isn't there. Think about a digital photo. It's made up of many pixels. The more pixels, the more we can zoom in and see. If we zoom in, we can clearly see the windmills in the back of this photo. But if the photo is low resolution, like this one here, then when we zoom in, we can't make them out. The windmills are still there, but they are blurred beyond recognition. The same thing happens with MRI. All the structural information is still there, but it has all been smeared together. So then how can we measure it? Well, we use a special type of MRI called diffusion MRI, which measures the movement of water molecules. But wait, what does water have to do with muscle structure? As it turns out, a lot actually. When you put food dye in water, the dye spreads out evenly in every direction. But if there is a barrier to this diffusion, like we see on the right, then the water is restricted in one direction but continues to spread in the other. By measuring the differences in diffusion in each direction, we can tell where these barriers are. Now let's go back to muscle. As water diffuses throughout our muscle, it encounters barriers to diffusion such as the cell wall, which affects how the water spreads out in different directions. By measuring these differences, we can determine the size and locations of these barriers, which tells us about the muscle structure. In order to connect diffusion MRI with muscle structure, we start with a simplified version of muscle. Then, using computer models, we simulate the MRI signal and smear it all together to get a single value, just like we get in a diffusion MR image. This lets us take a particular type of muscle structure and figure out the diffusion MRI measurement it would produce. We call this the forward problem. But normally we don't know the muscle structure. Instead, we measure the MRI signal and try and figure out the structure from it. We call this the inverse problem. It's tricky, but by using advanced computer models and high-performance computing, we can determine what type of structure would give us the same value we got from the MRI, giving us a good estimate of the underlying muscle structure. Solving this inverse problem will allow us to measure muscle structure quickly, safely, and accurately, giving us new tools in understanding muscle health, helping us all to get healthy and to get moving.